So today's video is for those of you who would like to be stronger, would like to be more flexible, would like to move with less pain. And you might have explored things like yoga or stretching or strength training, and your body still feels out of balance. You may be lacking in the area of your joint mobility. Joint mobility is a very expansive topic and a really valuable area when you're looking at improving the balance of your body and your health overall. And so today we'll be going through really 4 key guidelines to look at when you're moving on a path to improve your mobility. So let's dive in. And the first guideline we'll touch on is you can't improve your strength and flexibility and reduce your risk of injury if your joints aren't mobile. I'll let you start off with this, Marcus.
Yeah, and on the surface, it really seems obvious. But if you go back or if you look at your things you do in the gym or you do at yoga, we often have tendency to just go for this movement or go for more reps or go for the splits. And then this goal on the outside becomes too attractive and we are ignoring the basics. So, for example, if you want to lift more weight in a squat position or in a barbell squat, it's often so that we are not aware of where the body gets stuck. Even maybe it's in the feet or ankles or on the hips or on the spine or even in the shoulders. And we just push through to get more reps or more weight. And in this moment, we are ignoring the joints which are really mobile to do this full range of motion without getting blocked or injured or tense up.
Mm,
Uh, this is one thing I observe often. I observed in myself, and also when I trained for the splits, it was the same. I just ignored that my hip is not really mobile enough to get into the split position, and I just tried to push harder. And yeah, it doesn't end up that well.
mm,
In a
mm,
way, this is just a way to reflect on what we are doing and why we are doing it, and are we really listening to the body where it has its needs?
mm, mm. Yeah, there's the way I kind of look at it is a lot of strength movements, flexibility movements, they're movement patterns. As an example, we could look at squatting, deadlifting, various pushing movements and pulling movements for strengthening the body. They're all really effective and I love them. And there's great ways to do them and there's even better ways to do them in my experiences. But the thing with any of these movement patterns is depending on your habits, your level of joint mobility, you'll bring those habits and amplify them when you do a strengthening movement. It's like you bring all of your current qualities, your current level of structural integrity, your current level of joint stability around all of the joints, and you bring it to that pattern. And a pattern is like a sum of lots of parts of all of the different ways that the joints can move. And so if we're not aware of all of how the whole system is working, how the feet are stabilizing, the ankles, the knees, the hips, the spine, then if there is any imbalances that are habitual, then add load to it and then you amplify that imbalance. And so in the beginning, you might get stronger, but then what can happen is that imbalance can then build up and then turn into injuries. This happens with sports where you get good at certain patterns and then you get stuck in those patterns and then the body gets hardwired into those patterns and then you stiffen up in those patterns and then you've got to move outside of them and you get injured. So when we're looking at improving joint mobility, we're kind of breaking down in a way where we're breaking down those patterns and looking at it joint by joint, or particularly in key areas of the body that support the joints. So this is a useful way of looking at it. And the same in like any yoga posture, for example. Again, they're just patterns. And so within that pattern is lots of different joint movements. And if there isn't stability and mobility around each of those joints, well, that's the area, like you try and push the pattern, you try and push a posture, you could be like super mobile around your ankles, but super tight around your hips. And then the loading point goes into different areas of the body rather than evenly distributing it in different movements. And that's one of the key things that we want to look at. Once you improve all of the parts of the body and the way the joints move, then you can reconstruct it into patterns and it performs so much better. So that's kind of how joint mobility can start to then contribute to strength and flexibility because you get better stability in those movement patterns. You get better leverage from your biomechanics. And so then, like on a squat, you can you can get under the bar better. You can squat deeper. You've got more control over each of your joints so you can adjust and you don't have to be fixed into where a lot of people get stuck of like right and wrong cueing. And it's like, oh, I can't move my knees this way or hips that way or ankles that way because if I do, I haven't got the stability and then that leaves me vulnerable for injury. So what we're looking here is to build more resilience and more options with the ways that your joints can move in the patterns that you do in daily life and also in other training. So the next point we'll look at, which we've kind of touched on, but rather than just trying to improve your range of movement, your joint mobility, first we want to build mobility on a foundation of stability. And so often mobility, stretching, all of that sort of stuff, they kind of get stuck in the one bundle. So just want to kind of create some distinctions here so we understand what it is that we're doing with a clear intent, then we get better results. So then we can focus in our practice.
Yeah, it's just often a misinterpretation of mobility. Often people think about mobility just circling the joints or getting more range of motion in different joint positions. At least this is what I did, and what I often observe with people coming to work with me. It's not about getting more range of motion and trying this so hard as you can. It's more likely to see, okay, why is this mobile stuck in the first place? Why is this joint stuck in the first place? And often it's just a missing point, a missing base of stability. And if there is no stability, there will be no mobility. So instead of just chasing for the next millimeter of range of motion, just look at some areas of the body if they are really supporting the structure to get mobile. If there is no support, you will gain no mobility. So it's not just going joint by joint and pressing out more range of motion, for example, in circular manner or in different movement patterns. It's more likely, okay, what does the body need to give more mobility back?
Mm.
And this is a very distinctful and useful perspective and angle to go through the body. And yeah, we are talking about five main areas, and maybe you can share more about them to look for stability and create stability.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing that's worthwhile touching on is everyone's body is different, and it's not uncommon that some areas of your body may actually be hypermobile. So, I've worked with lots of people and they're already quite mobile to the point of hypermobility where a joint goes, kind of more past the, for example, the elbow. Instead of just going to a fairly neutral position, it would go further than that. And so not that that's a problem, but without stability, then the joint lacks structural integrity around it. And so then it gets more wear and tear around it. So this is why we want to have stability is kind of like a buffer for your joints to be cushioned and so that they can move with a sense of control. So one principle here that's helpful is, the joints that you don't have control over are often the joints that build up with tension and get kind of locked and blocked and pinch on the nerves and all that sort of stuff. So this is kind of why we want to have this base of stability rather than just stretching and pushing further and further. And so having that awareness of each of your joints, you might have some joints that are hypomobile, so where they're less mobile, and then other joints which are hypermobile. If we treat each of the joint areas as those individual areas need, then we can start to rebalance the whole structure and understand our body as a whole. So there's 5 key areas really that are useful to look at rather than just trying to hyper focus on every single joint. I find looking at these 5 key structural areas create a really wonderful structural support for the whole system. So you can go through these in any particular order, but it's really useful to start at the feet. If we look at the feet as like the base of a building, if there's something happening above, we want to look below because what is that building supported on? And so if the foundations are weak and not stable, not mobile, then the whole body above can be compromised. So particularly with the case of modern footwear and all of that sort of stuff, some people refer to them as foot coffins. Um, like the foot's trapped in this thing, and over time you lose connection with it and stability. So if we can start to open up those feet and stabilize them, then everything on the ankles, the knees, the hips start to get supported. Now, this is more helpful, I find, than just trying to, for example, lots of people with tight hips, it's not uncommon, and often then think, oh, I need to improve my hip mobility. But then if we don't have a good, stable foundation of the feet, it's out of context. Like the feet are supporting the hips. So we've got to look at, well, why are the hips stiffening up? And if you don't have that stable base, that's often why. So next, we can look at developing stability around the base of the spine. So at your tailbone, if we can start to get the tailbone moving, then the hip capsule then starts to move in all directions. So it's a really useful focal point. And because the hips then connect your lower body to your upper body, often we don't really have ability or sensation awareness if the hips have been deconditioned. So by bringing the focus into the tailbone, I find it really useful to start to go, okay, well, can I stabilize the tailbone in this position, in this position, in this position, in this position? Some people, when they first start to do it, they notice their tailbone is like the pelvis is twisted or tilted forward. It's habituated to one position. So we can then start to look at, in different situations, the orientation of the tailbone. And that then helps us because naturally the hips are going to move and reorient themselves. And we start to really stabilize that deep tissue surrounding the hips. So then we look up as to we've got the spine in between, and then we've got the base of the skull and the jaw. Often, these areas get tense and unstable, and the head starts to move forward. Then the whole postural alignment of the spine gets affected. And so then we can create this kind of like a dog chasing its tail to try and realign the spine in different ways. But if we have some awareness of the feet, have some awareness of the base of the spine, and then the base of the skull, well, then we start to look at how do we align and stabilize the body in space and start to see the relationship between these areas and then the base of the spine. Then the spine in between, while it's wonderful to move it, but we have this good, stable platform to move it from, and then understanding how those 2 points work together. Then we've got the armpits. Often, we think about opening up through the chest or strengthening through the scapula and all of that sort of stuff, but bringing our awareness to the armpit, it's like the center point of the shoulder. And this can really help to start to develop connection, like we were talking about with the tailbone. If we can become aware of what the armpit's doing, then you can start to do really every possible motion of the shoulder just by orienting and bringing your awareness to the position of the armpit. These are really, really useful focal points to start to develop stability around the body. And then the final point is the hands. And so then we can start to look at how do my hands then stabilize the elbows, then stabilize the shoulder. If you can connect with those 5 points, then like just have a think. Your body starts to have a support structure for really any movement that you can think of. And you don't have to do all of the little joints. We're supporting the structures around them. So then the joints in between can then sort themselves out. And this is a really useful way of looking at it. And not a lot of people are aware of this. So hopefully that's helpful when you're
Yeah,
developing joint stability.
it's really bringing in the peripheries of the body, feet, hand, face, and jaw. This is often overlooked, and people are not aware of that. If you're looking at the peripheries, the body in the center will naturally balance in itself out because the tension from the outside coming in gets less, and the body can start to realign itself in a way.
Yeah.
So it's a really simple way to look at it.
Yeah. It's a really beautiful sentiment there, like letting the body realign itself because it's got support, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than always just focusing on the areas where you feel tight and unstable, but then you don't have the support to relax into, and then your body keeps going out of alignment again to reflect that.
Yeah, and I know we both know those experiences just trying to pushing the hips, for example, for more range of motion, but not being aware of that they are not supported.
Yeah, made that mistake for a long time, and adductor tears and hamstring tears, and
Yeah,
yeah,
and the same for the shoulder. You're pushing out everything out of the shoulder, and you're not aware of that. Maybe your wrist or your thumb or or something here is really over tensed all the time. It will not work.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So these some really useful points. So that next principle is build joint mobility on a foundation of joint stability.
Yeah.
So the next guideline is mobility doesn't improve if you don't practice, and you're less likely to practice if it's not short and effective. Like this is so common. Like people come and work with me and they say, "Hey, I'm really tight." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Do you have practice that you do consistently?" And they're like, "Oh no, I haven't moved in 20 years." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, then what's the solution?" Like, "Oh, you should do a practice that goes for an hour a day every day when you haven't moved in a long time." Like, what's the it's so backwards in the thinking. What if we could actually like just start by building up gradually? And still to this day, like with most of my mobility practices, they don't go for more than 5 minutes and they don't need to. This is like more doesn't equal better. Often kind of what happens is when we haven't been moving for a while and when we get like super motivated to move and we like get all that momentum, I'm going to do this big workout or big whatever, and then you get really sore and then you just like yo-yo in this thing. But if we can give the body little clear pieces of stimulus over time, then it positively incentivizes us to keep going. And you often feel like, oh, I could do more. But think about like we're planting a seed and then just watering it a little bit over time. And that seed grows into, a mighty oak tree.
Yeah, this is maybe also often from a psychological state, like if people really get aware of that they need something to do, they want to fix it in as fast as possible. And they are not realizing, okay, if I haven't practiced this for 10 or 15 or 20 years, or even for 5 years, it will not improve faster when I now do those things 1 hour a day. This doesn't work. The body doesn't work like that. It
Yeah.
it just needs more awareness, and yeah, as you mentioned, 5 minutes a day can be the deal in the beginning. And just to get a foot into the door, so we really reconnect and make this a daily routine like brushing the teeth.
Yeah.
If this is happening, then the natural consequence will be that we are really aware of our mobility also in daily lives, And we will just check in naturally, example for the hands when we are sitting on the desk. Oh, just doing 1 minute, activating the hands or creating tension through my thumb or checking in with the feet or with the jaw. This is where the magic happens. It's not about doing a practice or a training 1 hour a day and then forget it. It's more likely connect with the body and bring it into daily life.
Mm,
And this is bringing so much more freedom, and it stops this separation of this is training and this is life. No, this can be together and go hand in hand.
well put. I really appreciate you use the teeth brushing analogy of like if you think about it that way, like you wouldn't go a day without brushing your teeth. Well, do what you want, but like you know what happens if you don't clean your teeth every day. So the joint mobility is like cleaning your body on the inside every day. Keeping it clean on the inside. So rather than trying to like get something out of it all the time, we're like this is like daily maintenance, keeping everything moving nicely and smoothly. And if it doesn't, then gradually coming back to that point, understanding some really simple steps to start to connect with the body. And that can take a little more time in the beginning. And, you might do 5 minutes in the morning and
Yeah,
then 5 minutes in a break of work. Like you can span it out through the day. Each time you're giving your nervous system new stimulus, your body is starting to digest things and then it starts to accumulate. So the quality stimulus over the quantity is far more effective over the longer term. And that adds up so that then in the bigger picture, after you spend potentially like in the learning phase a little bit more time, you might spend 15 minutes, like 3 lots of 5 minutes in a day, which is really doable, even if you haven't been exercising for a long time. And then gradually, you actually need to practice less, because you've built a good foundation. And then you can start to come back to shorter, more full body practices to then keep the body maintained and cleaned long term. So this is a
yeah,
really useful way of looking at it. So
yeah.
the last guideline that's really useful to look at is that mobility improves when your nervous system is in a receptive state. So there's two things that are really useful to look at when we're doing this. So they're your breathing and your movement. And so think about it if you've had an injury, if you've got pain, all of that sort of stuff, these all cause protective mechanisms within your body and your nervous system to keep you safe. And so then if you then go to try and go further than that, then the body then naturally will have this protective instance. And often we're so disconnected from the body that we then don't pay attention to these subtle signals. We push past it, we get injured, we give up and stay stuck again. So we want to look to how can we start to actually create a long-term sustainable improvement of the way the body feels and moves. And so the nervous system is a gateway to that, understanding how to work with the nervous system rather than just thinking about the joints and the muscular system and the fascia system. It all interconnects with the nervous system.
Yeah, and it can be so obvious, and at the same time, it's often really the harder part of the practice for people to get started off, because it's just connecting with the body on a deeper level and to become aware of where the body really gets stuck. So it's just looking at this next layer of what's happening in my body, in my nervous system on a deeper level when I'm doing X, Y, Z.
Mm,
And just as a simple idea, it can be as easy as if something is not feeling good at the moment, then just look where is a joint position where it feels better. This can be the start off. It hasn't to be complicated and just go from there.
Mm,
If if the first response of the body is when you go into a position, into a movement, and it doesn't feel good and it's creating some sort of pain, just go out of it and see where is a position where it feels better. And from there, it's really easy to go through the body and through the movements from this, yeah, from this really easy point of view. And of course, we can just start also focusing on breathing and movement and all that stuff. That's very useful to really see where I'm holding my breath and just go back to a position where you feel, okay, now the breath is more free and wants flow naturally instead of trying to force the breath. It's just like back off a bit and see, okay, now the breath is coming back more naturally, and the system will start to be receptive and open up. Yeah, just some
mm.
practical point of views, and you can make it a bit more uh, practical.
Yeah, yeah. It's, like one of the key things is that the more relaxed state we can be, it's sort of like working with wet clay. When the clay's wet and supple, it's easy to mold into different positions. When the nervous system goes into a fearful state, a shock-based state, a fight, flight, freeze, sympathetic state, then it's like that clay hardens. And so if you then going to try and stretch, open up your body, it's like trying to move stiff clay. So we want to get to a point where we can just meet the body where it's kind like you said, Marcus, where it's enjoyable, particularly if your body has felt like an unpleasant place to be for a while, starting to establish areas of movement that you can do and building on that, because wonderful thing happens is first the overall strength of the connection with your body, your willingness to connect with your body starts to grow. Then your movement, you're more likely to then just naturally want to move, and you're kind of like building like positive associations with connecting with your body, with moving your body. Once that starts to happen, then the fluids start to move much better, and like old injuries start to heal more easily, pain starts to relieve, rather than trying to like push through the pain or outstretch the tightness and all of that sort of stuff. It doesn't mean that we avoid these spaces of like, I just move where it feels good, and like this feels good. And so like I can relate to this because my spine was stuck like this. So it felt a lot better moving here than here because that was bloody painful, because my spine, I had all that stuff going on. And so, but by establishing, okay, what are the areas that we can move to start? What's happening with my breathing? Like little things like, can I kind of start to explore the edge of where I experience that discomfort and then just slow down my rate of breathing rather than forcing it, just letting it slow down. We might spend a moment in there, we might contract the body, relax the body, and then relax into that experience and then come out. And over time, we start to build a more receptive state to open up into that. And so that can be a really useful way of looking at it. And there's one ratio that I find really helpful to maybe give some more practicals with this, is that if you're working with an area that is injured, then I generally recommend don't go past 50% of your capacity. So as an example, I injured my elbow a while ago, and I couldn't even pick up my phone. That was like 100% capacity. The pain peaked, so I wanted to find movements and stability movements and mobilizing movements where let's say that was like 100%. You know, I couldn't even think about straightening, but it's like, oh, that's when it really peaks. So my movement zone was like here to start, and I would start to continue to do that while the tissue was healing. So I'm not re-inflaming it and, like re-inflicting the wound. It just lengthens the healing process. So, and as I'm doing that, I'm noticing the shock from the original injury can come up. And so, like, the body's sort of processing all of these things. So, if we give yourself some space, let your breathing start to slow down, then the nervous system can start to become more receptive, and then the body can open up a lot more rather than just trying to push it to open and dominate the body. We want to establish a connection, a respectful relationship with how we work with the body. And then it opens up like a flower. We just got to give it the right environment to open up.
Yeah, in also a live example from coaching last week. Yeah, one of my clients is playing at the championships, world championships of ice hockey, and he was injured in a game. He really hit hard his shoulder, and he was not sure if he can go on with this tournament. And we met up just for a Zoom call, and it was exactly what you just shared. We just looked at it. Okay, what is his body capable of doing at the moment? And we started as on his right thumb, creating tension through the thumb. And in the moment where he hit the right angle for the body, in a way, right angle where the body was receptive, this shock from this injury just went through the system in 30 seconds. It was just like opening the gates of boom.
Mm,
And afterwards, he was able to move his shoulder again and creating tension. And the next day, he was back to play.
mm,
So it's really to look into the system. Okay, where is the nervous system? Where does the nervous system went into protective mode
mm,
and was was there to create safety of not getting injured even deeper, and
mm,
just find the spot of where we can connect and release those, yes, emotions and shock waves in the system.
mm,
And
mm,
there it can be really easy to reconnect and uh, build back stability and mobility. Of course, in this case, there was not so much uh, tissue damage going on, uh, but the principle is always the same. Just look where the body is in protective mode and how can we support to release this protective mechanism.
mm, mm. Yeah, I really appreciate that example. And like the key thing that we're talking about here is that, like, establishing a space of safety and continuing to expand that. And so we need to meet the body where it's at rather than try and push through. It's like a kid in the fetal position that's gone through an emotional experience. You don't try pry the kid open, like, you give the kid presents, you let it open back up because you've given it a safe environment to open. And the body
Yeah.
is the same. And so, all in all, there's four key guidelines to look at. If you focus on these guidelines, your mobility will improve a lot. So, to recap, you can't improve your strength and flexibility and reduce your risk of injury if your joints aren't mobile. Build joint mobility on a foundation of joint stability. Mobility doesn't improve if you don't practice, and you're less likely to practice if it's not short and effective. And mobility improves when your nervous system is in a receptive state. So, we've got a program called Mobility in Minutes, which guides you through all of these principles step by step. There's more than enough what we covered here that you can self-explore and really improve. But if you would like support to be guided through that process, then we're here to support, and that's why we put it together.
Yeah, thanks for joining us and maybe seeing inside the course and support your body in getting more mobile and more supple.